Here early in the morning, heart of South Philly. Let's go see what the people have got to say. I'm ready to roll, baby.
Now listen here, Dutch. Mets and the Cowboys, they suck.
1, 2, 3, go Birds! Go Birds! Here we got 302BIRDS, Gino Stinks. Go Birds! Oh my gosh, Chad.
Your favorite Chicagoan. Go Phils.
As always, God bless. Go Birds.
Get your water ice and soft pretzels ready because you are now tuned into a 302BIRDS podcast experience. Proudly presented by TickPick, Nick's Pizza, El Diablo Burritos, and Klondike Kate's on the heart of Main Street. Let's take it to the show.
Yes, let's take it into the show. Welcome to 302 Fantasy with myself, Benny, and of course, my amazing partner, Dennis, with you today. Ready to talk fantasy football, giving you some last-second advice before we get into this Sunday, Week 3. Dennis, can you believe it? We're already in Week 3 of the fantasy football season.
It's hard to believe, ladies and gentlemen. I'm a little out of it this week. I'm still a little banged up from Monday, fighting a sinus infection here. So I'm sorry if I don't have as much energy as usual. So I'm kind of letting Benny take the reins this week. Crazy to think, Week 3 already. Everybody's schedules have probably been flipped upside down one way to another. Players probably aren't delivering where you hoped they would. You probably thought you'd be undefeated at this point, and you're probably 1-3, 1-2. Because I know I'm looking at mine, and I'm like, why? Just why?
You put in all that work in the offseason, you do the draft, you look at your team, you go through the roster, and you're like, man, I nailed every pick. The 16th round. And then by week 1, you're cutting, after week 1, you're cutting the guy you drafted in the 5th round because he got you 2 points.
Cut 4 people already.
The waiver wire's been hot. Let's just say that.
I picked up Zach Ertz this week.
And you know what? We'll get into that. That's a guy I think has to be kept on a lot of people's radar here. And I don't want to say that too loudly because I have he's on the waiver wire in my fantasy league, and I think someone's going to jump in and snag him. But this is a great show for last minute fantasy advice. We'll get into some trades that are going on right now. Of course, a lot of people starting to panic with some of the top 5 guys in ADP not producing so far, and we'll give you your start sit, your waiver wire people and everything. And we'll go through the injury report too and find you some injury replacements first. But first, I do want to quickly talk about some lessons we learned from last week. And I think this is something that a lot of people can start to kind of process a little bit as we look ahead to the rest of the season and just fantasy football lessons. Eventually, we'll have to do one of these shows where we sit down and talk about all the scars we've earned in our fantasy football playing careers. But these are ones that I just think a lot of people have to start processing here. A lot of people are panicking right now, as I said, on the top 5 people in ADP not producing. That's Tyreek Hill. Right now, he's wide receiver 20. We know CMC's been out, so he's not even ranked in fantasy right now. He's not producing anything. But Jordan Mason is pretty solid so far. So I think if CMC was to play, he'd be fine. CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver 19 going into this week. Jamar Chase, wide receiver 40. Amon-Ra St. Brown, his ADP had him as the 5th guy off the board in a lot of fantasy leagues. Wide receiver 25. If you have any of those players, you're probably sitting there going, what did I do? That was so wrong. I'm going to say this. If you're in a league where other people have these guys and you're seeing they're kind of starting to panic a little bit, throw a trade offer out there. See what's happening. At J.K. Dobbins, if you were lucky enough to grab J.K. Dobbins late, or one of these great receivers that's kind of, bubbled to the surface, being a pretty solid guy, or you played your waiver wire right and you have Mason or a guy that came off the waiver wire and, one of the Kansas City running backs, throw a trade offer out there, see what you can get, because these, especially for a running back like CMC, at some point he is going to play. At some point, these players are all going to have big weeks. And we know they're going to be able to turn your fantasy season around. So if you're in a league and you see that people are starting to panic, throw a trade offer out there because, take trade depth today to go and win a championship later in the season. I think that's a great lesson that everyone can learn, is go ahead and buy in on the panic, but don't be the one that panics. If you have these guys, relax. They're going to have their time to shine. Another thing is don't give up. If you're like me, you started 0-2 in one of your leagues. Some people, probably started 0-2 and then have Ramondre Stevenson that just dropped a negative burger. So congratulations. Not only did you get iced, you also now are staring at a bit of a hill when you're minus a couple points on that one. Relax. Injuries are going to happen. You're going to play the waiver wire pretty solid because guys are going to pop up on the waiver wire. There's trades you can make. If you started 0-2, you're going to be fine. Like you can turn this around. I've heard stories of people starting 0-5 and going and winning a championship, Dennis. So things can turn around at any point in time. And I think that's an important lesson. I think basically my lesson here is don't panic. In the first 2 points I have, and we'll get to the third point in a second, but Dennis, you don't panic, right, Dennis? Just relax. Everything's going to turn around.
You got to approach it 1 week at a time. You can't panic off of one thing. Like, I know we were joking around behind the scenes before we started the show today. Like last week, Tank Dell couldn't catch a ball, save his life, but he could run it all day long. But every target he had thrown at him last week, he couldn't catch it. I mean, we'll get into that later with Siddums, but I mean, he's one of my Siddums just because he couldn't catch the ball. But you get people, what's that kid's name from Atlanta? Algier?
Tyler Algier, yeah.
Yeah, like that kid. Like, I mean, Bijan's not going to take every touch, but he torched Philly last week in the pass game. I got him playing. I mean, you can't if you didn't draft him and he's sitting there, go get him. Kenny Gainwell.
Yeah,
Barkley's not going to be out there every play. There you go. There's two solid running backs that they will use, and Philly's proven. Like, of course, I'm biased because we're Eagles fans, but Gainwell is usable. He has a fumble problem, but he's usable.
Yeah, at some point, Saquon might get hurt. Again, their injuries happen. Relax. You started 0-2.
About Saquon, bro, really?
And well,
say you're sorry.
Saquon's going to be fine. I'm sorry, Saquon. But injuries happen to every player, not just players for the Philadelphia Eagles, but every team is going to experience their injuries. Every team is going to experience their, differing work shares. Guys will, come up and down the depth chart and roster. Just relax. Everything will be fine. And the lesson I've learned through this entire thing is wait on quarterbacks. I'm going to drop a stat on your head, and we know we have Dalton in the background here, and Dalton's probably going to be in the private chat with us, loving this. The ADP on you're probably yelling at me right now. Why you gotta throw me under the bus? The top 5 quarterbacks in fantasy scoring right now: Baker Mayfield, Aaron Rodgers, Derek Carr, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson. You want to know where those guys went in drafts? Oh, I'll tell you. Baker Mayfield was the ADP pick 167 in fantasy drafts this year. That means that he was going in rounds 13 and 14. If you're in a 10 team, he's going in rounds 14. If you have a 12, round 13. Aaron Rodgers was a 12th round quarterback. Derek Carr was undrafted. Kyler Murray was going in the 6th or 7th round. Like, wait on quarterbacks. Right now, Josh Allen probably is going to finish with a top 5 quarterback year. Jalen Hurts might get up there. But right now, early in the season, you could have waited on a quarterback and you're 2-0. So I think everyone needs to understand, don't be the team that reaches on a quarterback. My best advice for everyone in fantasy is don't even think about quarterback until you get to like the 6th, 7th round. Because at that point, look who you could have gotten. You could have gotten Kyler Murray. He's quarterback 4 right now in fantasy.
Literally, with Jalen starting to find his legs again and open up is what's going to make him be a threat in the point spreads and stuff like that for teams. That's exactly why I've kept Jalen. Because, again, once Jalen gets comfortable with this offense, with Kellen Moore, and the Eagles finally find their balls again, I think we're going to see the 2022 Jalen Hurts where he's not afraid to run. And we started seeing that in the Atlanta game. Because, again, like I told Dalton, me and Dalton had talked about this right after the game when I was going home. If he gets mad and he finds his heart again and he starts to unload, it's game on. What happened when he needed to put the ball on his court and he turned it on and started running. It was just, here we go. But let's get ready. We'll get ready to hop right into our stardom segment. I know we kind of been rambling because we're hyped up. It's week 3. We're ready to go.
Yes, we are.
Again, Benny, I'll let you kind of run with it this week with the start, and then I'll go to mine because I'm a little banged up here.
No, you're good. And we do have a couple of comments. We'll get to Fam first. We'll get to your stardom cinema, DK or JMO in just a second. And we'll also get to Juan Pena Jr. in this segment. So guys, just hold on. We'll get to your answers in just a little bit. But if you want advice straight from Benny right now, my starts of the week, I'm very excited to see what happens in that Miami and Seattle game. So I'll kind of pair this up with Fam first, and I'll kind of let you jump in here, Dennis. I'm starting Geno Smith, and here's why. 17 plus points scored in each of his first two games of the season. He's a top 10 fantasy quarterback right now. I think if you have a top 10 fantasy quarterback on your roster, unless you have 2 of them, you're starting at least one of them. And I think Geno Smith versus Miami is the game to go. And here's another reason why. I know Miami's got a pretty good pass defense, Jalen Ramsey. With the Tua injury, there is something to say about how knocking an offense off the rhythm can impact the defense. We've seen it all the time with other teams where their offense loses a piece, they're out of rhythm. I think if you are in a position where you have a Seattle Seahawk, especially DK, you put him in the lineup because I think that's going to be an interesting matchup in terms of how Miami can respond without Tua. And I'm just intrigued by the Seattle offense. Ryan Grubb has really put them in a good position to succeed. So Fam first, I know your question was, we'll throw it up here real quick. DK versus Miami or JMO versus Arizona, Swift or Dobbins. I'm going to say start DK, and I'm going to say also start Dobbins, because the Arizona defense shut down the Rams last week. They made me look like a complete fool. So I'm going to say
reminder.
I'm going to say DK versus Miami. I think Miami's thrown a little bit off offensively, and I just like Dobbins. I think Dobbins is going to have a pretty solid game against the Raiders, who can't really defend the run that well. Your thoughts, Dennis?
I'm starting DK, that's for sure. Miami's just in a struggle session right now. I think that whole team's just lost and confused now that they're knowing that Tua is out. They've got to find a whole new identity with a quarterback-wise. You're not wrong with Dobbins. I'm definitely sitting that with Dobbins, and I would run with it. It's about where I'm at.
Oh, yeah. Continuing on with my starts, Brian Robinson versus Cincinnati. The running backs in Cincinnati have finished. Pacheco was running back 14 in week 2. Ramondre Stevenson running back 7 against Cincinnati. I think the Washington-Cincinnati game is going to have a lot of potential for a late game spam. And what that means is, those final drives, just someone's got to catch passes. Someone's got to pick up yards. I think Brian Robinson's going to be the running back they turn to. Eckler, to me, I don't know what's going on there. I think he's not broken down, but I just don't think he's got that factor anymore. And I think Brian Robinson he's been in the offense, rookie quarterback. They're going to check down. They've proven they've checked down a lot. Brian Robinson's a guy that I slide into my starting lineups, especially against the Cincinnati defense that's very suspect. My wide receivers, if you have them against, and this is a risky start. I'm going to kind of put my neck out here a little bit. I like Giants wide receivers against Cleveland. Here's why. In week 1, CeeDee Lamb and Brandon Cook, they both were able to kind of feast later on, and CeeDee Lamb finished with 13.6 fantasy points, 14.5 for Brandon Cooks versus Cleveland. Week 2, Brian Thomas got 11.4. I know that's not fantastic production, but that was more of a balanced game script there. I think if this goes the way that we all think it's going to go, which is Cleveland's just going to run all over the Giants, I can see, again, a late game spam. And if you need to start someone in your flex, if you have a couple of good wide receivers and you're kind of going through injuries right now, if you have Malik Neighbors or if Wan'Dale Robinson's on the waiver wire, pick them up and throw them in your flex. I think they'll have a chance to get 10 or 12 fantasy points. That's really all you need if you're looking for just a weak streamer in your flex. So I think that's not a bad decision there for Malik Neighbors or Wan'Dale. And then Dallas Cowboys tight ends against the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens this year have allowed tight ends to get pretty solid production. Week 1 tight ends for the Chiefs combined for 13.1 fantasy points. Then we saw Brock Bowers just catch everything and roll right through the Ravens defense for almost a 20 burger. I'll say this: teams can throw on the Ravens and tight ends can produce against the Ravens. So if Ferguson starts, and it looks like he is, throw in Ferguson. If Luke Schoonmaker's out there and Ferguson doesn't start, pick up Schoonmaker and throw him in. Tight ends this year apparently are mostly all terrible. So if you can get 12 points from your tight end, you're probably putting yourself in a good position this week.
Start wise on my end, I kind of kept it somewhat the same, not really, kind of a few surprises. I know when I told you mine earlier, you were like, "Oh, okay." Then it's shaking it up a little bit. You've got to stick with James Conner. James Conner's still a solid running back for Arizona, dominated last week. Brian Thomas Jr. for Jacksonville, kid's doing solid in receiving. I'm just waiting for one more blowout week for him to really just open it up, as he's still getting equated to NFL, just like Marvin Harrison had a great week for the Cardinals last week. I think Brian Thomas Jr.'s big moment's coming. Reliable, he can't go wrong. Wish he was still in Midnight Green. Zach Ertz, I think he'll be one that comes up this week. Baker Mayfield, you definitely can't sleep on this week. I know we had a question in there about Baker earlier.
Sean Richardson, Baker or Dak?
I'm taking Baker.
And Juan, we'll get to you too. Sorry, we'll get to you.
Taking Baker because Dak plays for the Cowboys and the Cowboys suck. Sorry, I know we can't be biased. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I will say Dak against the Ravens is probably my play, just because Baker's playing the Broncos. They have a pretty good pass defense, but no, I loathe the Cowboys.
You're
but
being a freaking UD person right now. Why don't you go root for Villanova or something?
I like their men's basketball team. That's what I say. But no, I don't think you can go wrong with either one. I think Baker will get some points there, but I would go with Dak in this one. And then Juan, we'll get your answer. So Juan, yours is a little bit extensive here. So wide receiver 1 and 2, running back 2, and flex. So here we go. DJ Moore, Alec Pierce, Calvin Ridley, Tank Dell, Jerry Jeudy, Kyron Williams, Jerome Ford, or Josh Jacobs.
Whatever you do not play Tank Dell.
Yeah, Tank Dell against Minnesota. He could. Here's the thing. This is pretty broad here. Alec Pierce, I would not start. This is tricky.
My friend, we'll get to that one in a minute. All right, because Dalton, I know Dalton's in the background, so I'm just going to ask because I'm going to get very, very hands on here. Dalton, do we have any filter here, or can I just let loose?
Cut loose, foot loose. Just don't get me fucking canceled, brother. God's
good enough. Okay. Don't put Tank Dell in your starting lineup whatsoever, because the dude couldn't catch a tit if it was right in his hand.
Okay. There
don't
you go.
do it.
I'll say
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll say Calvin Ridley against the Packers defense is interesting. Alec Pierce against the Bears. I would fade Alec Pierce against the Bears. Tank Dell for me depends on how we kind of figure this whole thing out. Jerry Jeudy against the Jerry Jeudy is against the Giants. Honestly, I think I would go with Ridley. I would go with Ridley. I'd go with DJ Moore. I'd go with Jerry Jeudy. I'd go with Josh Jacobs. And I think that's the guys I would go with. I'd go with Moore, Ridley, Jeudy, and Jacobs.
You don't think Pierce could deliver this week?
The Bears defense is really good. They're really underrated, and they can shut down receivers. The Colts offense, we can get into this next week a little bit more. Anthony Richardson is on major fraud watch for me. Fraud watch for me. Yeah. I liked him to start the year, and he's just proven that he just is not a quarterback right now. I think he needs to sit. Jerome Ford seems like he's in a timeshare. Kyron Williams is going up against the 49ers. I'm not liking that. And then Tank Dell. Honestly, Tank Dell's not terrible against Minnesota. I just think they have too many mouths to feed. So, what's the ceiling? He's touchdown dependent.
He can't catch. He's Nelson Aguilar, Jalen Reagor all over again. James Thrash and Todd Pinkston and scared to catch the ball. So my last start that I had on the list was freaking Gesicki. Okay. Now that's my last start for the week. I think Gesicki's going to wake up this week and deliver a nice game. To jump to the sit, here's my only 2 sits. I've only got 2. Again, I've been really banged up this week with being sick, so I've kind of relied on Benny for a lot. I'm sitting Gabe Davis and I'm sitting Tank Dell. That's it.
Yeah, there. That makes a lot of sense. Someone got hurt by when we have the therapy session. You're gonna have your Tank Dell moment. You're gonna have your tank.
Dude, you don't
thing.
want me to have it. So no, look, I'm telling you, you don't want me to have a therapy session. You can ask
Welcome back
Dalton
a
about
lot.
me talking about Reed Blankenship. I'm telling you right now, if you have any defensive players in your lineups at all, do not have Reed Blankenship in your defensive lineup.
Which is
Don't
why
do it.
there are leagues out there that do the defensive side. J
Well,
Tubbs,
don't do
we'll
that.
get to your question in just a second. I'll do my sits real quick. Ezekiel Elliott outgained by Rico Dowdell. I do think that backfield is starting to shift towards more of a committee, and I think coming out of that, it's going to be either Deuce Vaughn or Rico Dowdell, and Zeke, I think, is just cooked. Week 3, you look at some of these matchups coming up, rough running back matchups from week 3. He's got Baltimore. Week 5 to 11, it's a lot of good run defenses. At some point, again, Rico's just going to take over. Touchdown dependent on Zeke. I don't like starting guys that are touchdown dependent. Christian Kirk is a guy that you not only can sit, you probably could even freaking cut him at this point. He's wide receiver 75 through 2 games. 2 games. I want everyone on this podcast right now to hear this. Through 2 games, he has 5 fantasy points. 2 games, he has 5. They've been targeting him 7 times. He's not number 1. He's not number 2. He is like the 5th option in this offense behind Travis Etienne, behind the tight end, behind the 2 other wide receivers, behind Trevor Lawrence just throwing an interception. They don't even freaking care about Christian Kirk. So I think you can sit Christian Kirk. You could even cut Christian Kirk at this point. That guy does not need to be rostered on a team right now. Drake London, great game against Philly. Not going to be that way against Kansas City. Wide receivers, I was not. That scarred me last week. The KC defense has shut down wide receivers. Week 1 against Baltimore, Zay Flowers had 11 fantasy points. Week 2 against the Cincinnati Bengals, the only reason Andre Ishivas was even rosterable was because he caught 2 touchdown passes, were his only 2 catches. So what would his day have been if he didn't catch any touchdowns? Kansas City shuts down receivers. They're going to do it again this week, and I think you can fade a lot of the Falcons players in this one. And then finally, and this one's going to be a bit risky. If you have tight end depth, consider this. Sam Laporta, tight ends versus Arizona this year. Kincaid, 2.1 points in week 1. Parkinson, 2.2 points in week 2. What's going to happen with Arizona and Sam Laporta this week? I think you can probably press the brakes on Sam if you have a good backup tight end. And then, Dennis, I think we have some people that need advice here. So J Tubbs, and we'll throw this back up here. J Tubbs, his friend wants Gibbs. Would you try to get one of his wide receivers, Ayuk, Flowers, or Jefferson, J-Mo, or Cooper? And then his other question here was A-Chain, Mason, and Brooks, so I have good enough running backs for the rest of the season. Okay. So he basically
I
wants...
would definitely go with Jefferson.
Yeah, if you can get Justin Jefferson for Gibbs, I don't think you can. I don't think that's I think if you asked for that, you're going to probably have to throw a little bit more in there. But yeah, Jefferson to me is a great trade right there. Flowers, Ayuk's his stock is kind of going up for me in terms of who's going to catch balls in that offense.
I
But I
don't
do
think
think
he's
that's
going
got
to open up until about week 5 or week 6 is when he'll start to really open up. Once they get CMC back and that offense starts to open up and flow, I think
things will balance out. You are right. I think Ayuk's
right now where they're just like,
yeah, though Kittle's out this week, Debo's out this week, so it's literally going to be Ayuk, Jennings, whoever they put in tight end, and Mason.
Really
I think
hit with the Mattern curse this year. Holy shit.
They are. So I would say Ayuk has a bit of a shelf life. I wouldn't make that trade straight up for Gibbs. Flowers, no. J-Mo, Cooper, no. J-Mo's interesting. They seem to just want to use him. So that might be, if you can kind of buy yourself some time in trade negotiations, hey, let's see what happens this week. J-Mo might not be a bad pick, but honestly, if you can find a way to negotiate for Justin Jefferson, little hint here, Justin Jefferson is one of a very few group of players I think that could finish as the number 1 fantasy player. And so far he's looked it. So I think, if you can do that and then you have A-Chain and Mason, I think you're set for a while.
I want to pick your brain on something.
Sure.
And I want to get your opinion. And Dalton, by all means, if you want to chip in on this one with your opinion as well, you'll be more than welcome. Do you agree? Because you even said it, that you would sit Zeke this week, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree over his career, or even from the start, that once he gets hit, he is no longer a downhill runner that he runs straight for the sideline. He hates getting hit.
Yeah, so people keep like the Patriots used him as more of a red zone running back, and the Cowboys use him a lot as a red zone running back. But Zeke doesn't come off to me as like a physical back. Like Rico Dowdell is like it's funny. The Cowboys running backs, they have name problems. Like each Cowboys running back's named wrong. Like when you think of the name Deuce Vaughn, you think of a guy who's like 6'2", 240 pounds. When you think of Rico Dowdell, you're probably thinking of like a smaller running back. Well, it couldn't be more different. Rico Dowdell's massive, and Deuce Vaughn is like shorter than me and you. So I think like the Cowboys use their running backs completely wrong. I don't get it. I don't understand it. I don't care. It's great for the Eagles when they go to play them. But
my buddy tried to tell me, he's like, "Oh yeah, Zeke's a power runner. He'll run right at you." I'm like, dude. Dude, as soon as he gets hit, he panics, and all he wants to do is run for the sideline.
I haven't seen Zeke break a tackle in probably 2 years. If someone has a clip out there, please send it to me at Benny on the radio, but I just haven't seen it. More questions really quick, and then we'll move over to our waiver wire segments. We have one here from Stephen Grease debating on wide receiver 1 and 2. Flex spot, full PPR, currently starting Pickens, Najee Harris, Demarcus Robinson. I have Carson Steele on the bench. Should I replace someone with him? Hunt not elevated. Yeah. So these Kansas City running backs are weird for me. And if we do an injury report segment, which we'll kind of get to a little bit later, I wanted to just, I know Dalton was into it. I'm not necessarily into the Kansas City running backs. It looks like that's going to be more of a hodgepodge and not necessarily anyone kind of stepping forward. Also have McConkey on the bench. I don't know
what to tell him on that one. That's a whew.
So Pickens is going up against the Chargers. Najee Harris against the Chargers. Demarcus Robinson against the 49ers. Oof.
You're kind of you're in an uphill
McConkey
battle
against the Steelers.
I can chime in on Steele if you guys want, because I did watch a fantasy football podcast before this, and the one thing I did see in my notes, he's getting significantly more work than
in the red zone.
I forget his name. Yeah, and he's already gotten red zone takes. But also, Atlanta has the 6th most rushing yards allowed per game. So keep that in mind. That's the only thing I'll throw out there.
You know what? I'll roll with Dalton on this, even though I'll kind of go against my gut. I'll say flex Carson Steele. Wide receiver 1, I would go with Demarcus Robinson. Wide receiver 2, I would go with George Pickens. And here's why. I think someone in the Rams offense has to do something. Like someone's got to catch passes in that offense. I think the Chargers shut down running back, so I would probably sit Najee this week. Lad McConkey against the Steelers, they shut down wide receivers. George Pickens against the Chargers, again, they're gonna have to throw it to someone, and I think George Pickens is talented enough to give you something there. But Steven, I do not envy your situation, brother. God bless you. Go to church today. Make sure you get God on your side. Dennis, do you have any? I'm praying for you, bud. I'm praying for you.
You better HBK that motherfucker.
If you can go through the host line twice, get some extra Christ in you.
Steve, let me know if you get any of that HBK magic with the pyro behind you, bro. You're gonna need Mr. WrestleMania for that lineup.
J Tubbs here. He said, "What about 2 wide receivers? My wide receivers are Amon-Ra, Kupp, Worthy, Tyler Johnson, Reed, Quentin Johnson. Oh my gosh, you have good ones." Yeah, so I would do. So this is going back to the Gibbs trade. I would say package Gibbs, probably Gibbs and Worthy. To be honest with you, if you can do Gibbs and Worthy, and then you can leave with Amon-Ra, Reed, and Jefferson, I think that's pretty good. See if they do Gibbs and Worthy, and if they do Gibbs and Worthy, you can always take Kupp and get a running back later if you need one.
I don't know if I would give up Xavier Worthy, though.
The reason why I would is just because you have Amon-Ra, you have Reed, and you have Kupp. And Tyler Johnson, I think, is going to give you good enough production to at least be a reliable flex.
Right now, though, you got to remember that Kupp's hurting off that hamstring.
He is, but I do think he will come back. I don't think he's out forever. And honestly, Worthy has some trade value, and I think he's going to have his weeks, and you're just going to have to shrug. But listen, if you get Justin Jefferson in a trade, don't care what you gave up. Don't don't give a hoot. He's gonna be the number one wide receiver in fantasy.
Sell your soul.
Sell your soul. Sell your soul for Jefferson. Do it. Push all in. You know what? I was listening to a podcast this week, and they were talking about the Monday night game, which this will be the last time I talk about. And they said, I would rather die going all out than like letting a team basically go down the field and pick me apart. I'd rather blitz myself to death than die just playing prevent defense. And I could not agree more with that. And it's the same with fantasy. I'd rather go down swinging. I'd rather go down just pushing all my chips in and saying, here we go. This is it. I'm going for the championship. Take your swings, because if you don't take your swing and you don't even make the playoffs, you're going to feel like you left stuff hanging. But if you took your swing,
in football always was, and it's different than everybody else's, die by the sword, not by the shield.
Yes.
Go
Die
down
by the
fighting.
sword. That's a good one.
Do not go down like a coward. Don't cower. Don't panic. It could say you have a 3% chance of winning your game. Don't matter. You live by the freaking sword and you punch it.
I could not agree more with that. Let's get into waiver wire stuff here. So a lot of these players, they're still here. They're still out there. And if you need some guys last minute to pick up, I know some people in the chats are talking about some trades and stuff. We'll get into a little more trades in a little bit, but let's do waiver wires, and I'll do mine first. My pickups of the week. Right now, quarterback 14 is looking really great, especially for Mr. Tubb. If you can pick up this guy and then make the trade for Jefferson, you'll have an awesome stack with Sam Darnold, who's owned in 37% of leagues. Look at some of the matchups they have coming up. Look at these defenses that allow a lot of passing yards. Week 3, you got Houston. Week 4, you got Green Bay. Week 7, you got Detroit. And then you're going to have that Darnold Jefferson stack. I think he's a great pickup, and you don't have to give up much for him. Justice Hill is a great handcuff for Derrick Henry, and he's getting work. Like, the Ravens aren't just exclusively going through Derrick Henry. They're giving the ball to Justice Hill. Right now, he's running back 29, which means if you're in a 10-team league, he's rosterable. Like, if you're starting 2 running backs, that's a guy you have to put on your bench. So Justice Hill, 31% rostered. Week 3 to week 10, 7 out of 8 of those matchups are against great teams that you can run on. And right now, he's tied for 5th in fantasy and 5th in the league and catches for running back. So he gets catches out of the backfield. Talked about this a little earlier, that stack with Jefferson and Darnold. Go and get the Jefferson handcuff, which is Jalen Naylor, rostered in 18% of leagues right now. He's touchdown dependent, but I think if Jefferson has something happen to him, and again, knock on wood, that doesn't happen. But next 7 games against really soft pass defenses, I think Naylor's going to get some production there with Addison possibly getting hurt and a good wide receiver handcuff. Pick up any of the Rams wide receivers. And here's why. Someone in that offense will have to do something. Someone will. Why not pick up a wide receiver that's going to give you something? Tutu Atwell, Demarcus Robinson, Tyler Johnson. Some people are even going deeper and picking up, I think his name is Wennington. Yeah, go and grab one of them. Demarcus Robinson's got a high snap share. Tyler Johnson's gotten 10 targets in 2 games. Tutu Atwell leads the Rams in wide receiver fantasy points, aside from Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. And then I'll give everyone a bonus wide receiver here, and this is more of a high floor play. If you just need someone to throw in your lineup, last year's late season DeMario Douglas, who was a guy that just did wonders for me, got me 11 points when I had bye weeks coming up. Josh Reynolds for the Denver Broncos is wide receiver 34. He's rostered in 10% of leagues. Like, no one rosters this guy. Week 1, he had 9.5 fantasy points. Week 2, he had 13.3. He hasn't caught a touchdown, so this is just volume. This is just a high floor. And 9 catches on 13 targets this season. If you have a bye week coming up or you have injuries and you just need points to survive, he's a high floor play. At some point, he's going to have all that production and then catch a touchdown, and that's going to be a 20-point week for a wide receiver on an offense that's awful. So just, pick up Josh Reynolds, throw him at the end of your bench, and if you ever need him, you can at least count on him to give you 10.
Speaking of the Broncos, another one that's still sitting out there that a lot of people dropped over this past week that I was looking at. Cortland Sutton's been dropped by a bunch of people this week because he's not producing. But you give him time, let him get on the same page as Bo Nix, you're going to see something open up. Because again, it's Cortland Sutton, dude. Like
he's going to get his.
Sleep on him. That's just mine. My last minute waiver wire that I was looking at. I dropped him just because I needed something to really like connect with AJ being out. But that's one you got to watch. And then with Sam Darnold too, Sam Darnold starting to find his confidence again. Where Minnesota might have something. Yeah, they drafted McCarthy to be their quarterback of the future, but I think he's gonna have to sit a little bit if Sam Darnold gets comfortable.
Yeah, and well, he's hurt for this year. And also, if you're in a keepers league, again, we're just talking about playing this year. You're playing for the championship this year. Next year, we don't know what's going to happen. It could, Sam Darnold could be traded. Tutu or Tua could never play again, and the Miami Dolphins go out and make a trade. You don't know what's going to happen. I want Tua to play again. The NFL's better when Tua plays, but right now you're just looking to win. And to me, Sam Darnold, again, the talent's always been there with Darnold. It's just he played for the freaking Jets and he played for the freaking Panthers. Like,
God help him.
It's very clear that the Jets finally have a great quarterback because, it just so happens to be one of the 3 greatest quarterbacks to ever friggin' play football. And the Panthers had Baker Mayfield, who's wide receiver 1 or quarterback 1. They had Sam Darnold, who's quarterback 14. And they got rid of that for Bryce Young, who they now sat. And we can get, I guess we can have this conversation right now. Originally, when we get into the drops, I was going to say Deontay Johnson's a guy to drop. I actually think you can keep him because Andy Dalton is so much better. 37-year-old Andy Dalton is so much better than Bryce Young.
Cincinnati Bengals Andy Dalton?
Cincinnati Bengals Andy Dalton.
He's still around, ladies and gentlemen. He's still around.
He is still alive. He's still breathing. He is not collecting AARP just yet, his Social Security checks. Andy Dalton is still in the league, and he is still. This was a wild stat I heard on a podcast this week, and this is a true stat. Andy Dalton has the most passing yards in a game for the Panthers in the last 65 games. Process what I just said. Andy Dalton played 1 game last year for the Panthers and has the most passing yards for a Panthers quarterback in their last 65 games. That is the entire post-Cam Newton era.
That's sickening.
Like, that's how bad quarterback play has been in Carolina. And now they're bringing back Andy Dalton.
You know it's bad when the times have changed, when the 2 teams that you went for your career to die was the Cleveland Browns and the New York Jets. Now it's you go to the fucking Panthers for your career to die.
Carolina's in a bad place to now
No, but things have changed. You either go to the Patriots where they're barely winning, or you go to the freaking Panthers.
Yeah, it's
the Giants. Or you go to the Giants and deal with Daniel Jones.
Welcome to the NFL in 2024. My drops of the week. So no Deontay Johnson. Keep him on your roster. I think Andy Dalton's going to resurrect his career. I actually might even say you might want to go out and try to look for Adam Thielen on waiver wires too. But if you have these guys in your rosters, you can comfortably get rid of them. Justin Herbert is quarterback 24. So far in this year, he has 10 fantasy points in each game, which is not, that's atrocious, especially if you're in a 10-team league. Quarterback 24 is not rosterable. In a 12-team league, quarterback 24 is not startable. So if you have Justin Herbert, he's rostered in 64% of leagues, currently starting in 21% of them. I don't know why people are doing this because week 3, he's got the Pittsburgh Steelers this weekend. You're not starting him. Week 8 to 11, which is right around that crunch time for the playoffs, he's just got atrocious matchups against teams that are going to eat him alive on passing. So Justin Herbert's not going to finish in top 15. So why even bother rostering him? He can just sit on the waiver wire. Jalen Wright is rostered in 50% of leagues. This is the running back for the Miami Dolphins. It's down to about 37% after the start of this week. He's running back 90. I don't know what people are seeing here. They're going to run Devon Achane until the wheels fall off. And then after that, they're going to run Raheem Mostert whenever he comes back until the wheels fall off. And then after that, they're going to run Jeff Wilson until the wheels fall off. They for some reason don't really think Jalen Wright has the get up there. He's gotten 0.4 fantasy points and 5 carries in the entire year. So you can let that guy go. Josh Palmer, wide receiver 88. He's questionable this weekend. I think he's good to cut. It looks like they're going with Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnson. for more work. And then DJ Chark's going to come back at some point. He's rostered in 40% of leagues. If he's on your roster, or if he's going to be a guy that's on your radar, you can get rid of him. Dalton Schultz, it looks like there's just too many mouths to feed in Houston. We already talked about Tank Dell and that situation. He's the 25th tight end in fantasy, owned in 80% of leagues. He's gotten 4 points in 2 games. You can cut Dalton Schultz. I think that's pretty comfortable, especially this matchup against the Minnesota Vikings. And then this one is more of a personal note here, and I want people to put this to bed. Let's dig the grave, open up the hole, and drop this guy in it. Taysom Hill. I'm done. I think everyone should be done. Tight end 33, rostered in 40% of leagues. He has not gotten more than 50% of snaps. So every year, Taysom Hill has that 1 week where he scores 30 fantasy points. And people go, oh my God, it's the future. Oh my God, it's the future of football. Oh my God, everyone's going to start having gadget players. This has been happening for 3 years. Enough. Let's stop. This is going to drive me into insanity. Enough with Taysom Hill. He is, if he was as talented as everyone would say, the Saints would use him. They don't. They just kind of pop him in and he has his one pop game. It's not worth that one pop game, which is random and no one ever knows when it's going to happen, is not worth keeping that guy on your bench. It's cute. It's funny. It's a meme. Let it be a meme.
You ain't wrong. But is there any more fan questions that we got to get to? I know everybody's trying to get hyped up for the 1 o'clock games. We've only got about 2 hours. I mean, is there anything else you wanted to touch on, Benny? Anything?
So that was my drops. I think we can talk about injuries really quick. And some of the way to navigate this. So Joe Mixon is out today and he's not playing. So if you have an IR spot or if you have a bench spot that's open, sit Joe Mixon. I would say pick up Cam Akers. And I think Cam Akers is a fair start. Now, I know there's some depth there with Houston. People are saying Dameon Pierce. I'm not crazy about Dameon Pierce. He just doesn't seem like he has the juice. And there's the other running back that was he's got a crazy last name, so I'm not even going to try to butcher it. But he was the guy that kicked the field goal last year for the Texans. I think it's going to be Cam Akers, even though he had the fumble problem. Cam Akers is the guy I think you can roll with in this week, especially against Minnesota, where, I mean, it's going to be a balanced game script. So who knows, Cam Akers could get 10 points and a couple carries, more yardage. I don't think he's going to get many touchdowns, but if it's just this week, Cam Akers is a fine guy to put in there and replace your Joe Mixon, or pick him up so that way the Joe Mixon owner in your league doesn't get him. And then maybe you can work out a last minute trade. The Chiefs backfield again is still a little murky. I'm not crazy about touchdown dependent Carson Steele. I think he will get his touchdowns. Samaje Perine is going to get the volume in terms of the carries and the catches. And then, of course, when they get to the red zone, they're going to use Carson Steele for kind of punching it in. And they brought up Keontae Ingram. I don't think he's worth rostering right now. Maybe we'll see what happens. But they do have Hunt on the practice squad. I think that's mostly just for a name and depth. I think the hope is
give it time.
Well, I mean, I don't know, like what does Hunt have left to offer? I mean, he's old.
I don't think he's washed yet. I don't think he's like dead to the league. He's just one of them situational backs that you can bring in to be a threat that people have to watch. Because again, yeah, he's got a little age to him. He's got a little miles on him, but he's not dead. Like, he's still got some bursts in him. Like, look at Julio Jones last year. Everybody thought, like Julio Jones was going to be this big blowout target for the Eagles last year. They didn't bring him in to be a big blowout target. They just wanted him to be that third body. That's all they wanted. Now look at it. Now Saquon Barkley's that third body, but you also have Jahan Dotson. So it's one of them things. It's a catch-22. I do agree their backfield is a little sketchy, but
avoid if you can. And I think the other comment I have is coming out of the injury report. A lot of people are starting to, start to look at trades. And one of the biggest trade pieces right now, if you drafted him, has been J.K. Dobbins. And I mean, we saw it in the chat. Some people are talking about dangling Dobbins out there. And it's interesting to me, like J.K. Dobbins is going to finish as a top. I mean, right now, in terms of fantasy rankings, J.K. Dobbins is running back number 5. You got Kamara, Hall, A-Chain, Barkley. And then J.K. Dobbins with 43 fantasy points is the 5th rated running back in fantasy right now. And he leads in, I think he leads in rushing yards right now, 2 rushing touchdowns. It seems like he's become the lead back, or at least the featured back in the Chargers offense. Now, I think that's gonna stay balanced for a little bit. I don't think they're ever gonna exclusively go with one running back, but I think as the year goes on, J.K. Dobbins is only gonna see that profile increase. So let's talk about trades right now, Dennis. And I don't want to put too much out there right now because we're kind of starting this up, but people are starting to make trades. J.K. Dobbins right now, his stock has never been higher since he's been even when he was with the Ravens, his stock wasn't this high. I think if you have J.K. Dobbins right now, you have the biggest trade chess piece in fantasy.
No, you're not wrong. I mean, he's definitely delivering more. Me with my injury knowledge and things like that, he's still one of them ones you have to keep an eye on because of the injury bug. But yeah, he's definitely one that you can keep an eye on that could definitely turn up for you. If you can get him, go for it.
Yeah, I would say if you can utilize him to increase some positions on your fantasy roster, go for it. That would be going out and getting a better running back, upgrading a running back situation, upgrading your wide receiver situation, packaging him up with maybe a wide receiver to go out and get a top end talent. Like, listen, if you could do this, this would be crazy. If you could take J.K. Dobbins and maybe a solid wide receiver, maybe like a DJ Moore or even Malik Neighbors. If you have Malik Neighbors and J.K. Dobbins, take those two and see if you can't get Tyreek Hill or Jamar Chase. See if you can. Just see. Why not? Throw the trade out there and see what happens. And I think if I was a Jamar Chase owner and they're panicking a little bit, again, capitalize on the panic. Don't be the panicker. Capitalize on the panic. Trades are starting to brew here.
To add to what he's saying, remember what I said earlier. Live by the sword.
Yes.
You don't know unless you go for it and you try it. Live by the effing sword. Whether it's a pen or an actual sword, live by the sword.
There we go. No better way to end it right there. This is going to be an awesome fantasy weekend, everyone. Make sure you follow us, myself, Benny, at Benny on the Radio. Dennis is
I'm gearing up. I'm ready.
Dennis is at Dennis 302 Fantasy on Instagram. But of course, follow us on the page at Sleeper 302 Birds. This has been such an amazing show. Dennis, any final words before we wrap up?
Oh, yeah. You ready for this closer? Dalton got a taste up at the tailgate. You ready for this? What you gonna do, ladies and gentlemen? Sleeper app 302 Fantasy. What you gonna do when me, Dennis, and Benny run wild on you and your fantasy stats this week? We'll see you next Sunday. Good luck this week. Go Birds and fuck the Cowboys.